Hi there, and welcome to the Utah Bovine High Path Avian Influenza Certified Milk Tester training video. Due to the USDA's new rules about lactating dairy cattle crossing state lines, it's now required that some classes of dairy cattle have a milk sample collected before they are moved out of the state. Due to that, we've put together this training video so that certain individuals on each dairy can become certified testers so that a veterinarian does not have to come out to the farm each time to collect these samples. In order to become a certified tester for avian influenza in dairy cattle, in other words, someone who is able to collect the appropriate milk samples for the appropriate number of animals to be tested before shipment, the process is as follows. First, you need to watch this video. Second, you should complete the application, the link to which can be found on the Utah Department of Ag and Foods website or linked below this video. Then you'll have your veterinarian sign off on that application after you've demonstrated to them that you understand the process of sample collection. Finally, you'll mail that application back to UDAF. You can either use snail mail, fax, or email. In total, there can be up to 2 sample collectors per dairy. So this is probably the most important part of the training, is knowing when to test animals for high-path avian influenza, so when to collect these milk samples. So per the USDA's new rule, any healthy lactating dairy cattle that are moving across state lines do need to have these milk samples collected, and they need to be collected no more than 7 days before they cross state lines, but they also need to allow enough time for the lab to read the samples and have the negative results back before the cattle are moved across the state lines. There is an exemption for lactating dairy cows that go out of state in order to go directly to slaughter, so milk samples would not need to be collected in that case. Other situations where you don't need to collect samples would be if animals are moving to an in-state auction or slaughter in-state, non-lactating cattle, so heifers or dry cows, and a dry cow is defined as any animal that is not leaking milk. So you do have the option of taking your cull list, stopping milking those animals for about a week, and then sending them across state lines. Those animals would not need to have this milk sample collected in that case. And then finally, we're not going to be using this to test clinical cattle, and that's because any animal that's clinical or sick needs to be brought to the attention of your veterinarian or give us a call here at the Department of Ag, and we definitely don't want those animals to be moving across state lines or even moving off farm. Once you've decided that you have a group of lactating cattle crossing state lines that do need to have these milk samples collected, you're going to want to figure out which day you want to collect them. It's going to take the lab a maximum of 3 business days to process these samples, but per the rule, you can't collect them any more than 7 days prior to the shipment date. So we're going to recommend that you collect your samples from 3 to 7 days before the planned shipment date, and those are business days. If you're sending a whole potload of cows, you only need to sample 30 of those animals, but if you're sending 30 or less, you need to sample every single one. Taking a sample involves testing milk from all of the functional quarters of that cow. So you're going to have 1 tube per cow, but then you'll fill that tube with milk from all of her functional quarters. You're going to just squirt a little bit of milk from each of the quarters into the tube. Make sure not to overfill that milk collection container, and you're going to want to have about 3 to 10 mLs of milk total. Then the final piece on the tube is that you're going to want to put down a tube number 1 through 30, or however many number of animals you're shipping if it's under 30, and then you're going to match that tube number and write down the cow's official ID on your ID paperwork as well as her barn ID tag. Official ID for cattle is either an RFID tag, usually starting with an 840 number, or a metal tag, either an orange brucellosis vaccination tag or a silver tag. This is a quick list of the sample materials that you'll need to collect your milk sample. This is going to be very similar to collecting milk samples in an aseptic manner like you would if you were collecting for a mastitis case that you wanted to culture, or even prior to drying off an animal. So this is a photo of those same sample collection materials. On the right, we have our ID sample collection paperwork. So this is basically just listing the tubes 1 through 30, and then you're going to write down the cow's corresponding official ID and her barn ear tag. We've got our alcohol swabs, 1 for each teat. So we've got 3 in this case. That would mean this cow has only 3 functional teats. We've got our milk sample collection gloves, so a clean pair of gloves, a Sharpie to fill out our paperwork and label our tubes. And our tubes here, again, we don't want to use the snap top tubes if possible. We could recommend using a red top blood tube or some twist tubes. And then this paper towel here represents the towel that you would use to clean off the teats after you pre-dip your cow coming into the parlor.
Pre-sanitize the entire skin of all 4 teats using a pre-milking teat dip, and allow at least 30 seconds of contact time. Wipe the teats dry with a clean paper or cloth towel. Using an alcohol-soaked gauze or swab, scrub each teat end, working from the furthest teat to the nearest to prevent contaminating a clean teat with the operator's hand or arm. Starting from the nearest teat and working to the furthest, strip out the first several squirts of milk onto the floor. Open the sample tube and hold the tube at an angle to prevent debris from falling into the tube and contaminating the sample. Squirt out several milliliters of milk from each teat into the sample tube. Repeat the process for the other 3 teats, working from nearest to furthest. Close the sample tube and place it immediately in the cooler.
Here's a list of the things that you'll need to properly ship your milk samples. And here's a photo of those same items. We've got our cooler box, an ice pack, our milk sample vials filled with sample, paper towel, Ziploc bag, and then we've got 3 pieces of paper. We've got our submission form to the diagnostic lab, the ID form matching the tube numbers with the cow numbers, and our overnight shipping label. So here we're demonstrating proper packaging technique for your milk samples. So you're going to take your milk samples. You can use this sort of twist top vial or a red top tube. Either way, they need to be properly identified with the cow's official identification number. You can take your samples and put them inside of a plastic bag that seals, along with a paper towel or some or other absorbent material in case they leak. The next step is to take your plastic bag full of samples, put it inside of the cooler box, and along with that, you will add your ice pack outside of the plastic bag. Finally, you will take the lid to your cooler box, put it on top of the cooler, and then you will add your sample collection form and your lab submission form, making sure to indicate an avian flu PCR test. Fold those and put them on top of your cooler box. The final step to the process is to close up your box, securely fasten it with tape, and then add your overnight shipping label to the box, making sure that you don't have any other shipping labels present on the box. This is the top portion of the Utah Livestock Certified Tester application. As you can see, you can fill out your dairy's name and the owner name, the veterinary clinic, as well as the 2 testers who are going to be trained to collect the samples on these dairies. If you're unsure about what your premise ID is, feel free to reach out to the Utah Department of Ag and Food at the contact information above. And this is the bottom portion of that same form. So once you've filled out the demographic information at the top of the form, both of the testers are going to initial each of these requirements here, indicating that they understand these parts of the training. If your dairy elects to just have 1 tester, that's completely fine. So quickly running through these requirements, the first thing that the testers will initial is that they will only be a person collecting these samples if they've been approved to do so by the herd vet. And they will be indicated by the tester initialing and the vet signing off at the bottom of this form. Second is that you've watched this video. Third is that the tester understands they'll collect 3 to 10 mLs of milk per cow, and every functional quarter will be sampled, and this is what we call our composite milk sample. We are not going to mix milk from multiple cows into 1 tube though, so it's a composite sample for 1 cow, not from multiple cows. The fourth thing is that each tube will have 1 number on it, the number 1 through 30, and then on your ID paper, that tube number will correspond to the cow's official ID number. The asterisk here lets you know what counts as official ID. So that could be an RFID tag, brucellosis tag, silver tag, as we talked about. And that will be recorded for the lab to know which animal is which. The fifth thing is that the samples will be kept cool with an ice pack near them while they're being transported to the lab. And you can either drive the samples to the Logan lab or you can overnight them. Important, the samples cannot be frozen. So if you do have frozen milk samples and then they thaw, that is not going to be an okay test, and those animals are not going to be able to be shipped across state lines. The other thing to note is that only the Logan lab has the capability to run this test at the moment, so unfortunately these cannot go to the Spanish Fork lab. And the final thing to initial off is to understand that if you're shipping 30 or less animals, every single animal needs to be tested. If you're sending more than 30 animals, just a maximum of 30 need to have that milk sample collected. And then finally, the owner of the farm and the vet will sign off on this paperwork. If you have any questions on this process, please do not hesitate to reach out to us here at the Department of Ag and Food, Dr. Price and Dr. Sabo. If you have any questions about the lab portion of this, feel free to reach out to the diagnostic lab up in Logan. Congratulations! You've now finished the first step to becoming a state of Utah certified tester for bovine avian influenza samples. So all you have to do now is fill out that paperwork, have it signed and sent in, and you are ready to go.